Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Jerome Roberts, who's GVP of Marketing at Bloom Global. And today we're going to talk about improving supply chain resilience, how a digital supply chain orchestration platform can help. So, we're nearing the end of 2022 here, and supply chain logistics executives are busy preparing their strategies and plans and budgets for the year ahead. And one key objective for many of them is improving supply chain resilience, which includes, improving their supply chain visibility capabilities and developing stronger and more transparent relationship with carriers and other trading partners. So, what actions should companies be taking to achieve these goals, and how can technology help? So, those are some of the key questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Jerome on the program to share his insights and advice on this topic. So, Jerome, welcome to the program.
Adrian, it's fantastic to be with you today. Thanks for the opportunity to share some best practices from our customers and what we're seeing, so customers can be more successful moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, Jerome, we've had several of your colleagues there at Bloom Global on Talking Logistics before. You're a first-time guest, so before we dive into the topic, I always like to ask first-time guests, how you got into this industry to begin with, right? It's always curious, fascinating to me how people kind of wind themselves into the supply chain logistics world. So, why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your role and responsibilities are there at Bloom Global?
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. Actually, I feel a little old. I've actually been in logistics probably for 28 years now. I started my career very early with UPS. Had a great opportunity to, work in the international division with UPS during the times of international expansion, and also, was around to see from the mid 90s what happened with e-commerce, from kind of a small company trying to sell books online, which everybody thought was weird, to now, right? Everybody's clicking, online for everything, right? So had an opportunity to help customers through that and really change the portfolio for the company, but also had an opportunity to work on the supply chain side. And fortunately, about a year now with Bloom, where I lead product marketing and marketing for the company.
Well, that's great. Well, UPS is not a shabby company to start your supply chain career with, and certainly one of the leaders in the
Yeah.
industry, and they've gone through a lot of transformation themselves. As the industry has progressed, as you said, from those early e-commerce days to, the realities of today's market, which is much more global, much more dynamic, where e-commerce is certainly a driving force behind many of the trends that we're seeing in the industry. So let's get into the topic right now. I mean, here we are again, October, almost November of 2022. 2023 is right around the corner, and you've got things like inflation, recession, uncertainty, risk. I mean, these are all kind of dark clouds that are kind of swirling overhead as we close out this year and head into 2023. So, what should companies be thinking about? What action should they be taking? To strengthen and prepare their supply chain operations for the year ahead.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Adrian, and is and all the viewers know, it's been a heck of a time over the last several years, right? I'd be dated if I say, a pandemic, because the reality is we've had the pandemic, we've had, ships stuck in canals, we've had, a number of things that have caused, it just wreaked havoc, on supply chains, worldwide. Not to mention, conflicts that are ongoing, with a lot of uncertainty. Now, right, we're looking down recession, which could, wreak havoc on demand curves. So, logisticians and supply chains and companies everywhere are like, it's the planning cycle for 23. What is my demand going to look like? How do I maintain our revenue goals, our top line goals, our bottom line goals? And at the center of all of that is always, the very glamorous topic of supply chain. So it's always at the beginning and the end of the solution, usually of both top and bottom line revenue. So there's a few things that I think that, companies that are going to continue to thrive are going to need to do. One, we know that there's tons of technology providers out there. If we had a stroke count on the number of times the word visibility is used, right, and the number of companies that are seeking to provide you with that visibility, right? We all know that visibility is important. At the end of the day, you can't drive a car without being able to look out at the windshield. But what's more important than looking out the windshield is actually turning the wheel, right, and making the right turns. So the action is more important. So one of the things that I think we're finding a lot of companies do, and I'll give you three things. This is first, is they really need to streamline their technology solutions. I think that a lot of these kind of boutique organizations kind of came out of nowhere. They're offering you this and that. And the operators are increasingly, I think, frustrated, right? They have to go between two or three different applications, softwares, one for this, one for that. You got a different one for the ocean. Well, wait, I got air, I got last mile, I got to do this, right? So consolidating those systems is really going to make it easier as much as possible for the operators to actually act and take advantage of the opportunities that they see and also mitigate anything in flight. Number two, and hopefully we can dive into this a little bit later, is the detention and demurrage. There's more accessorials out there to be had in terms of reduction, but I think there's a big opportunity as we talk to clients to really dig into that detention and demurrage issue. And there's some low-hanging fruit there, right? There's nothing that's going to nip at profit margins more than not paying attention to what's happening there and being able to mitigate that. And then finally, I think what we're finding is a lot of our customers, there's a lot of opportunity to optimize costs in terms of their carrier selection, right? Not all carriers are created equal, but what you really have to be very cautious of going into this situation with potential recession is you don't want the pendulum to swing too far on the cost side without consideration to customer service. So those are the three things I would say, Adrian, are low-hanging fruit that if organizations are going to be successful moving forward, that they're likely going to be on top of those three objectives.
Yeah, a lot of great points there, and I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting. When we were kind of wrapping up 2020, we were saying, okay, it's got to be better in 2021, and then 2021 came, and then it was a little bit different, but the challenges were still great. And then we said, okay, it's got to be better in 2022, right?
And here we go again, right?
And here we go again, right? So I think we've stopped saying it's got to be better. We know it's going to be challenging. We know it's going to be unpredictable. We know it's going to be volatile. And now the question is, how can we best prepare ourselves for the the famous saying, you got to be prepared for the unexpected, right? And I think you're right. I mean, I think on the technology side, certainly analysts, consultants, technology companies. I mean, we've been talking about this move from point application or software applications to this move toward platforms, right? And towards certainly I've been talking about that, the future is not just about software, but it's about software and networks coming together. And the kind of the network effects and the power of that's going to help drive the next wave of innovation and capabilities. But I want to dive a little bit deeper in some of the things you talked about, starting with visibility. I've been an industry analyst, so I feel old myself. You said 28 years. I'm 23 years, so I'm a little bit behind you. But every time I say that, I'm like, really, has it been that long? But visibility has been at the top of the priority list for companies, for 23 years now at least.
Yeah.
And so it remains a top objective. And obviously, like you said, the more blind spots that you have in the supply chain, the more difficult it is to identify and respond to any kind of disruptions or changes in the network. So let's talk from a technology standpoint, from a platform standpoint that we were just talking about. I mean, what is different today and how supply chain visibility is enabled compared to, let's say, a few years ago? I mean, what should companies look for in a solution and a provider? And I think that the $1 million question, which I always hear from shippers and others, is, how can companies derive, or how are they deriving business value from visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Pravinder, our CEO, has been on your program a number of times, and I think what he focuses in on is beyond visibility, right? It's like, hey, look, the end destination was never just visibility, but it was the start. And I think most people will agree, if you assess kind of where we are today versus where we were in terms of visibility maybe 3 years ago, we are in a better place, right? So regardless of the platform you're using, or regardless, the world was kind of forced into making this a better situation from a visibility standpoint. So let's just chalk that one up as that's good, right? But what's next, right? How do you actually extract the value, which is the key to your question, and that is how you actually translate the insight from the data and the visibility that you have to actually moving into, well, now how do I change my planning as a result of this visibility? And remember, visibility also includes the ETA component, right? Which varies greatly. So I think that's still kind of, at the beginning, right? And the promise of machine learning is going to make that even better. But how do you translate that into your plans so that your plans are better? You end up getting, better OTIF, rates for your customers. But then how do you actually take advantage of the data while the merchandise is in transit on whatever leg it's on, to actually save money, mitigate expense? We talked about detention and demurrage. There's things that you have to do, if things pop up, that if you don't take action could be very severe in terms of the profit margin. So it's really all about the action, right? So you have to go beyond visibility and you have to get to the action, which has been a little bit harder to do, right? Um, it's very popular to say, the first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem before you can do anything, right? I won't there's many areas of that where that can become relevant, but supply chain is the same. So, we have to now understand, now that I know I have the information, what do I do? And I think that the key there is now making sure that the practitioners and the operators know, have the information, but they also have access to the tools to take the action, right? So I think that's really the key, Adrian, and that's really what we're finding with our customers has been and continues to be the challenge, right, moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I wrote a blog post earlier this year, talking about supply chain visibility and whether it was a solution or was it a feature of a solution, right? And I kind of boiled it down. If you've got supply chain visibility, but you don't have transportation management, warehouse management, yard management, software capabilities, optimization capabilities, workflow execution capabilities, I mean, you're not going to get the value, because ultimately, to your point, it's not just about seeing through the windshield of the car and see what's up ahead. It's being able to actually then turn that steering wheel. When the supply chain context is being able, hey, can you feed that insight, that data, that analysis that's taking place? Can you feed that then to a transportation management capabilities, or warehouse management capabilities, or yard management capabilities,
Mhm.
to drive some actions and decision making, and then automate and streamline some of those actions. So if you've got visibility but you're still working with spreadsheets, that's not going to help you very much. If you've got visibility but you're not connected effectively with your trading partners to be able to communicate changes in plans or things like that, that's going to limit the success there as well. So I think that's a key point, is it's the ability to do right? And that's where I think a lot of the
Yeah.
software applications come in that reside on the platform
Well,
come in to
Adrian,
help.
I mean, one of the I had someone make a comment to me when we were talking about this that I think is brilliant. You know, the spreadsheet is where opportunity goes to die, right? It's like, okay, well, yeah, you got the spreadsheet, you got all the data, but is that where you need the data and you need the information? You actually need to be taking action on that, right? So the spreadsheet is nice, but you really should have that in a digital operating, system where you can actually get the triggers, you can take the action, and operators can really, make the moves in real time based on the information and not have to go jumble through, the 36 sheet workbook and go to tab number 3 and do the drop down number 6 and try to find out what the heck is going on, right?
Exactly. That's I like that. I think a corollary to that is that it's also, you're also a lot of sometimes that action knowledge is in the head of a particular individual, right? And I
That's
think
right.
as we learned a lot during the pandemic, if that individual is sick and is not in the office, or he or she leaves the company, so there's a lot of institutional knowledge that's just stored in someone's
That's right.
mind just from their years of experience. But ultimately people move on and so forth.
Yeah,
And so being able to put that intelligence and that knowledge within the platform so that
yeah.
it becomes kind of independent of any one person, I think is also,
That's right.
an important part of this as
Well,
well.
every organization has their supply chain oracle, right, which works great, as long as the person is there. But look, God forbid you take a PTO or you get sick, and then all of a sudden your customers are like, what's going on? I'm not getting anything, right? So when are we going to get Joe back in the office, right? It's like, okay, yeah, that's not a sustainable solution, right?
Exactly. Not sustainable, not scalable either, obviously.
Exactly.
So let's talk to the other point that you brought up before. Ocean shipping. I mean, has arguably of all the modes, has received the most attention over the past 2 years because of all the delays and the disruptions and so forth. And the tension and demurrage fees, which you brought up, are among the hot topics, especially considering the changes from OSRA 22. I mean, again,
That's right.
maybe talk a little bit about that. What changes that's brought, and then how can technology again help
Yeah.
avoid or mitigate these fees?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. I mean, I can tell you what, um, I don't think that people really understand kind of, what's going on in this space. So first of all, let's just kind of level set, right? The Ocean Shipping and Reform Act in June, that President Biden signed was actually a good thing for BCOs, right? It does kind of three things. The first thing is, it directs the FMC to take, action to investigate kind of what's going on with the reasonableness, of the charges that the ocean carriers are putting in place. And then secondly, it actually shifts the burden of proof, from the BCO to the ocean carrier for those reasonableness challenges. And then third, right, it now requires specific items on the invoice so that people can actually discern the details behind what's happening here. So first of all, it's the education piece to kind of understand. So yes, it was a really good thing for the BCOs, the shippers. We could get it. There could be a debate on, okay, what was going on there, right, to kind of prompt that to happen. But at the end of the day, it's meant to be a good thing. But the macro point that should come out of that is everyone needs to understand kind of the micro details as to what's going on there, because there's a lot of money organizations can save that will go straight to their bottom lines if they pay the right attention to this item, right? So when you talk about the technology, right, technology solutions that are out there, um, that I am specifically aware of, will allow the BCO. As a matter of fact, Bloom has solutions for the carriers themselves, right? The draymen that are out there to be able to invoice properly so they don't get into legal trouble, right? Because that is a possibility now. It's a real possibility if carriers are not compliant there. But then BCOs have the opportunity with this additional information and foresight to actually make different decisions, to avoid these charges. One thing that we always provide to our customers is Bloom Maps, which allows you to see, what is going on at a terminal in terms of, the wait times or the different statistics and the health of that location, right? Having that information and planning that appropriately um, is huge low-hanging fruit, right? So being in compliance and understanding all of the different benefits coming out of the uh, you know, OSRA, as well as having a dashboard that gives you the foresight of all of your shipments while they are in transit, which ones are at risk, which ones are currently booking the fees, and then actually assigning to your operators in real time, taking action on that is really going to, the organizations that come out of this more successfully, better than their competitors, are going to be paying attention to that. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, not yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's so much focus, and it's the same thing also with with on the trucking side as well. I mean, there's so much focus on the rates side of things, right? But there's a lot of money that's perhaps being left on the table with some of these detention and demurrage,
Mhm.
fees. And you're right. I mean, this has been particularly over the past 2 years has been an area that a lot of shippers, BCOs have been complaining about because, some of these fees have been, astronomical, and there was no rhyme or reason or explanation in terms of how they were derived and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
So this is an area that I think now there's some regulation associated with it, and the ability to manage this aspect of it successfully, in addition to obviously the regular procurement around securing capacity and rates. That's important.
Right.
But I think your point is don't lose sight of this aspect as well, because this could potentially be significant to your bottom line if you have the visibility to it, you've got the data associated with it, and can take appropriate action to mitigate it.
I mean, we know customers who've had, 100% increases, 200% increases as a result, right? And they just really didn't even know what to do with it, right? And by the way, they're not sitting around just, waiting for this issue. They're highly busy, just, you know, staying afloat. So, having the right tools in place is extremely important so that you can actually, systematize, the remedy and mitigation of it in the course of all the regular activities that you're doing with your supply chain. So,
Right, right. Well, let's kind of shift a little bit of gears here and talk about the relationship side of things, because I think you brought that up as well. And certainly, we conducted some research with our Indago supply chain research community, the executives in that community, which are from manufacturing, retail, and distribution companies. And one of the things that we asked them about, what actions are going to take to make your supply chains more resilient. And one of the things that came up on top was developing stronger and more transparent relationships with their suppliers, with their carriers,
mhm,
and other trading partners. I mean, why, particularly as it pertains to the logistics side, the transportation side? I mean, why is this
mhm.
important? And what are the benefits of really, thinking intelligently and thinking through, what it means to have strong relationships with carriers?
Well, I mean, as you know, Adrian, right? If you go back kind of to the beginning of the pandemic, there's a lot of blind spots in the end tier, supplier kind of infrastructure of supply chains, right? When an area would shut down because they needed to, mitigate COVID, um, the lack of transparency within that supplier network ended up obviously having a devastating effect, through right, it's the bullwhip effect, yeah, through the ability for that organization to sustain inventory throughput, right? Especially manufacturers, right? They could have end tier suppliers that they would have clearer visibility to the first tier, but then when you go beyond that, when you go to raw materials, it was just a dark spot, right? So, one of the things that Bloom recognized as a result of the recognition, we made an acquisition last year, and now we have capability for sourcing technology and order management and those types of technologies right on the platform, right? So when you talk about integrating that technology in, having that right next to your visibility and logistics capabilities is key. So when you talk about the relationships, if the organizations don't have it right now, they really need to shore up their front end supplier visibility network and order management and item visibility, incorporate item visibility into their capabilities, which will allow them to actually not only mitigate those things in real time, but also identify vulnerabilities so that if they need to put redundancies, right, and have alternative suppliers in the network, that's where the resiliency starts to get built in, right? So if you're able to leverage the technology to get visibility and have all of those suppliers participating on the platform, that's where the collaboration takes place. So you can both understand and set up resiliency with redundancy, but also in flight, be able to mitigate that in real time by switching once you find that a node or a second tier provider may be shut down, which continues to be a risk. I mean, we have this conflict going on, right? I don't have to tell you, the implications of what's happening in many, many facets because of that and that alone. But that continues to be an uncertain question mark and could bubble to other areas of that are main supply areas in terms of raw materials and other things. So now more than ever, especially depending on what it is that you sell, you probably need to shore that up if you don't, have the capabilities strong on the front end of your supply chain technology. Right?
It's interesting, for years, we talked about the importance of becoming more demand driven. And I think over the past year and a half, a lot of the companies I talk to, if not the majority of them, saying, we're actually supply driven right now because, we have to have visibility of what's coming in. We're supply constrained, right? So we can only build and sell what we have, right? And we can only build based on what materials and components are actually coming in. And that's what we have to kind of promote to clients is, the goods, not necessarily the goods that they may want, but the goods that we're actually able to procure
Exactly.
and produce. So I think that ties in perfectly to everything you were just talking about in terms of having that visibility to supply base, having that visibility to incoming orders, and whether it's to a manufacturing facility or it's inbound to a retailer, the supply piece has become critically important. It's become a constraint in the supply chain arena.
Exactly.
So Jerome, as a way to to wrap up, I mean, we covered a lot of ground today, and I think we could probably easily speak for another hour or two, but maybe as a way to kind of tie everything together, I mean, what do you think is the biggest lesson learned for supply chain executives from the past 2 years that they should apply moving forward?
Yeah, so I think I can sum it up probably in 2 words. And I'll elaborate on the 2 words, but I'll say 100% digital, right? 100% digital. And when you kind of unpack that, there's a lot there in those 2 words. But kind of talking, summarizing kind of what we've talked about, during this session. All of the solutions are basically taking things that were analog before, phone calls I was making. Believe it or not, I think in some areas you still got faxes going on, right? You've got paper, you've got spreadsheets people are getting lost in. But help is on the way, help is here, and that is making sure that you leverage a digital platform that's able to capture, from the front end sourcing piece to the visibility component to the logistics execution, the booking, and then all the way in through the distribution and the last mile, right? Being able to actually, we talk a lot about the digital twin, and sometimes you have all these buzzwords that people start repeating, but do they really know, what does it all mean? And I think the point of arrival, right, is when you can seamlessly orchestrate the beginning and end of your supply chain 100% digitally with predictive ETAs, with alerts and triggers, being able to take action all the way through, and then rinse and repeat, right? It's easy to say those two words, probably harder to do with all respect, to the practitioners out there. But I think that's the point of arrival, right? And it goes back to beyond visibility, right? So that's what I would leave everyone with, Adrian.
I like that point of arrival definition or vision. I think that is, where a lot of companies are looking to get to. We talk so much, in the past few years about digital transformation, the importance of digital transformation. And I think, to your point, I mean, sometimes these are just buzzwords or people hear it and they're like, well, they're all so busy in the day-to-day stuff, that just seems like such a big Herculean task to do. But if there's been one positive out of the pandemic and the ripple effects of everything that's happened since, is that companies recognize that, hey, you know what, it really is time to walk the talk on this digital
Exactly.
transformation because we can't get by anymore with spreadsheets, with faxes, with having a disparate number of systems and so on and so forth.
Don't forget
Uh,
about the supply chain oracle, right?
and the supply chain or and the supply chain oracle as well. That's right. So I think that is a good a good lesson learned and a good vision for where companies need to be thinking as they move forward into 2023 and beyond. So Jerome, again, thank you for making the time to be with us today. Again, provide some great insights and advice on this topic, and certainly would love to have you back on the program down the road. Touch, go deeper into some of these topics, or who knows, there might be some things like as we've already learned, there might be some unexpected things that will pop up in the weeks and months ahead that will provide some great food for
Hey, you
thought and
think?
conversation.
I think it's pretty much a guarantee, Adrian. So,
I think you're right.
this is an ongoing, we'll just help each other through this, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Bloom Global website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Jerome, you can post it there. And I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.